it was an incredible experience to be able to just, you're like, this is this event that's bringing all these people together, doing something outdoors and seeing these incredible places.
Welcome to the Low Tide Boyz, a Swimrun Podcast. I am Chip.
And I'm Chris, and this is episode 40 of the show. Can you believe it, Chipper? 40 episodes. Plus, because we got all that bonus stuff out there, too.
I don't know if I thought that we would get this far.
Yeah, I think if you listen to episode, 17 or something, we were saying, we're going to go back to every other week. That was a lie, obviously.
And the evidence is determined that was a lie.
Anyway, this week we have coaches Lauren and Matt Hurley from Black Sheep Endurance Project on the show. Besides being super accomplished athletes in their own right, they're also leading the way in training athletes for multisport and swimrun. So you should get your notepads out for this one because the show is packed with a lot of info, a lot.
Be ready. It's a great one. It's a great one.
More on the interview later in the show.
Totally. So on to the training update here. So we've been really battling with air quality here again. Right now at the time of recording, we're in a lull, so we've been able to get out, and it's pretty much if we can get outside, we're doing the most that we can, making sure we get our swims in and everything. We are approaching a month, 4 weeks until Ödyssey Swimrun Austin, so we're really starting to kind of dial in our gear choices, and we have a couple longer swim run practices planned, obviously weather permitting, so that should be great there as we get excited and prepared for the endurance hootenanny.
Yeehaw! I'm trying to get better at it. I feel like my yeehaw is very sort of monotone.
Now, I wonder if on the course, if they will, if Texans, is that
I don't think. No, I don't.
Or is that
think,
an enduring thing, like a yeehaw? If when we do the cliff jump, we should just belt out a yeehaw, right?
I think so.
I think
so. Yeah, but I don't think Texans are walking down the street yeehawing each other all day.
Or on Pacebin Park, yeehawing left and right.
There's
going to be a lot of yeehaws at Pacebin Park come November 8th.
Probably all from us.
Anyway, on to the shout-outs.
Yeah, so this week, we've done this a couple times, but we're going to shout out the entire country of Taiwan. They clawed their way into the top 10 of most downloads by country, which is pretty cool. They passed Japan, so there's a little bit of rivalry going on there. So, yeah, we just wanted to shout out that whole country and thank them for listening. And if you want a fun fact, 65% of the world's wetsuits are manufactured in Taiwan.
Wow. That is a fun fact.
Yeah.
Now for the feats of endurance.
Endurance.
Feats. Feet.
Bam, bam,
feet.
bam.
Feet
of endurance.
So our award this week goes to Lana C. She's been holding it down on the Strava Club. That's the Low Tide Boyz Strava Club for all the new listeners that we have. Join there to follow along, and she's really been dropping down some serious kudo-worthy activities down under in Australia.
Which is spring? Because it's reverse, right? So summer's winter, so fall is spring.
I think
is that how that works?
What's up is down.
Yeah.
And what's down is up.
I just know that the toilets swirl the other way.
I thought that was like a wives' tale.
I mean, I saw it on The Simpsons.
Should we look it up, Snopes?
So...
Snopes.
Snope it up.
All right, on to our favorite theme song segment, This Week in Swimrun.
I love that intro.
It's good.
We have
Such a jam.
It's just a jam. We have a short report this week.
We should play it again.
Keen as Mustard Events in the UK had another race this past weekend. They've basically been dropping races every week. This one was at Nene Park at Peterborough Swimrun. It had 3 distance options with a mix of solo and team categories. There was a long course of 21K, which looked cool. It looked a little bit chilly out there. Oof. So perhaps the smiles were frozen in people's face, but at least they were smiling. Now, over in eastern France, Swimrun Aix-les-Bains looked pretty cool. It was an urban swim run going around Lake du Bourget. in case you're wondering what's going on in Aix-les-Bains, it's known as a thermal spa town, and swimming, sailing, golf, and now swimrun are the popular sports. Landmarks include the Roman ruin, the Temple of Diana in the town hall, and there's also the Chateau Les Roches du Roch. So, in case you're wondering what's going on, I was channeling my inner Phil Liggett for you Tour de France cycling fans.
I think our French might be better than our Swedish.
Slightly better.
I'm
not
if
great,
you notice, though. I respectfully am bowing out of these as to not insult native speakers of such language with my butchering.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're not going to catch all these events, so just make sure to send those over to lowtideboys@gmail.com. Tip us off for the race if you know that, or tag us on the Instagram as well, or
that works.
Send it to us as a message or something if you want. On to the Low Tide Boyz updates. So as you know, Ödyssey Swimrun is just a month away. You can join us, the Low Tide Boyz, and all of our friends who will be there. I know one Marcus Barton will be there.
Yeah.
A lot of great folks will be there.
I also saw on the team list there was a team that was called #SuperStoked. So
we're super stoked about that.
I'm super stoked to meet them.
We are as well. So use code LowTideBoys with the Z to save 25% off any entry off the Ödyssey Swimrun Austin, and we're looking forward to being out there and having fun. So again, as a reminder, our friends at Precision Hydration have turned the discount code back on. So once again, that's LowTideBoys with the Z. That'll save you 15% off your order. So if you have any questions about Precision Hydration, you can literally email them. There's a live human that will chat with you. You can do a Google Hangout or a Google Meet, whatever they're calling it now. And they'll talk you through the process and kind of recommend some products for you. Personally, I did that.
Yeah.
I found it to be really helpful. It was like a 20-minute chat. I basically jotted down like a nutrition plan. It was that helpful. So Low Tide Boys for both of those there. And finally, just a friendly, gentle reminder, the holiday seasons are approaching and you want your loved ones to look as sexy as they can. So be sure to pick up some Low Tide Boys gear. We have 3 different shirt styles there on the website. So go there to the store. So that way you can show your Low Tide pride at your local Costco or Wegmans or, Ad Nature or REI or wherever you wear a shirt.
Yeah, wherever you're wearing shirts, it's a good shirt
place
to wear.
Yeah.
So on to this week's interview. As we mentioned at the beginning, we have Lauren and Matt from Black Sheep Endurance Project. Lauren Hurley, formerly Lauren Goss, you might recognize that name. She was a former triathlete before becoming a coach. And Matt was a coach with Purple Patch Fitness before starting Black Sheep Endurance Project with his wife, Lauren, in 2019. They met at the 2018 Escape from Alcatraz, and legend has it that Matt fell instantly in love with Lauren at first sight. So this episode, there's just a lot of knowledge. We do the usual chit-chat, and then they just start dropping knowledge bombs on us.
I had to sharpen my pencil multiple times since I was scribbling notes feverishly.
Yeah, so I learned a lot. I think it's interesting to see some of the recommendations they had. I don't want to spoil it, but one of them of doing your long swims and doing your long sets fatigue to sort of mimic what it would be like in a swimrun race. I think that was really good advice. And there's just a lot of that. So we get a little bit into their coaching philosophy, how they interact with their athletes, all one-on-one. Anyway, it's super cool.
It's really great.
You might recognize the names. They were the coaches that were nice enough to comment on our Austin swimrun
provided
course
some workouts
preview.
there.
So I think you're gonna like this one.
You will, for sure. So enjoy it.
Yeah, let's just
get your ears ready.
Let's do it. Yeah,
get your ears ready.
Warming up.
Get your notepad ready.
Yeah.
Let's just
Black
Sheep Endurance Project.
All right, with us today we have Matt Hurley and Lauren Hurley, formerly Lauren Goss, on the show, and they're from Black Sheep Endurance Project. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure to be on with you guys.
Yeah, we're super stoked to have you on. And I think before we get into sort of coaching stuff, we'd love to hear a little bit about you guys, how you met, and sort of your coaching background and how you learned about Swimrun.
Yeah, you want to take how we met?
Yeah, we met at Escape from Alcatraz triathlon in
nice
2018. Yeah, I was there racing, staying with another pro friend, Kevin Collington, and at the time, Matt was working for Purple Patch and Kevin was working for Purple Patch Fitness. And so they were meeting to get a coffee and just chat. And I just joined along. And then I met Matt and he fell in love immediately.
Oh, of course he did. Of course.
I was a little, and he had no idea who I was. And I had won the race the year before Alcatraz. Oh. And so I told him that. And then I think he felt a little.
Well, I was like, oh, you won the amateur race? She's like, no, the professional race.
Oh, boy.
Which I don't care. That was fine.
Slow play.
And then we did the race. Matt was competing in a relay with the Challenge Foundation. And I was obviously doing the race. So we started the race at the same time.
Because Alcatraz is one of those unique races where the Challenge division went off right after the pros. You literally jump off the boat right behind them. So I was excited because I was actually going to get to swim with the pros.
Yeah, and follow the boat.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Following the boat is such an advantage because like the pros get to jump off the ferry, and then there's like a guide boat with a big old red ball in the back, and you just follow that in.
And for our listeners who don't know what Escape from Alcatraz Island, which formerly was a prison.
Yep.
Basically, a giant boat, a 2 or 3 story boat, drives you out near there.
Yep.
And then everyone jumps off the boat and swims into the shore. So you're kind of pseudo escaping from Alcatraz, a la Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, it's a 1.5 mile swim with 3 currents to help you along. It can either be glassy or 3-foot whitecap swells. Like you never really know. It's a pretty crazy race.
Yeah, it's tough. It would actually be a good swim run thing.
It would,
yeah.
But anyways, we exited the water. Matt says he exited the water a little bit ahead of me.
I did.
Oh.
Not sure I got to transition before him. Then
roll the tape.
Interesting. We'll look at the timing chip data.
Whatever. The transition run is a kilometer long. It's so long.
Yeah, I do remember Lauren blowing by me through transition, and I was like, "Oh, there's that girl," and she had the laser focus, like just burning through transition. I was like, "Well, I better move this along."
Yeah. So we actually did not hang out after the race, but we stayed in touch. And Matt came and visited later on in Boulder, and then, well, now we're still together.
Yeah, and he was already in love with you at that point because it was a coffee that he fell hopelessly in love. So he went to Boulder to kind of try to woo you. Is that how it worked?
It was a delicate situation because you can't we're talking on Instagram and so it was this. Keeping just enough contact with her to not be a creep. And and eventually it all worked out. Now we have a 2-month-old son.
Congrats.
Awesome.
Started our own coaching company, and it's been a really amazing 2 years together.
Wow.
Thanks to endurance sports, right?
Yeah, totally. You're in the thick of it on the parenting side. So, much empathy from us here.
Still married.
Yeah. And so, okay, Matt was with Purple Patch, and you were a pro triathlete. How did tell me about from that kind of point and the escape from Alcatraz? How did you decide that you wanted to kind of break off from Purple Patch and do your own thing as a joint venture? That seems like a good place to take this next.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I started coaching in Maine and moved out to San Francisco. It was 4 years ago now, somewhere around there. And I worked under Dixon and started really at the bottom of, I really worked my way up through Purple Patch and learned. I mean, much of my education is really from Dixon and his methodology. And obviously I've grown as a coach and have my own ideas, but that sort of trial by fire and education is just something that I'll always be grateful for. And Matt and I still have a fantastic relationship. Right. Ultimately, it was, Lauren and I, when she got pregnant and I was looking forward at our life, I wanted more flexibility. I didn't want to work as much during the first year of the baby's life. And the job at Purple Patch was really demanding. So I was head of coaching by the time I left there, and I was writing most of the programming with Dixon and doing a lot of other things, managing our coaching team. Yeah. And it was a really intensive job and really fulfilling, but it was extremely demanding. Matt expects a lot and demands a lot, and nothing he doesn't ask of himself. But Purple Patch ultimately, is growing and evolving in their own way, right? They have the center and now the squad program that they've built is this incredible one-to-many coaching platform. And I think around last year, what I really love about coaching is working with athletes and individual relationships and that sort of fulfillment. And I was doing more on the administrative side. And Matt and I actually, it came about really organically, like where I said, it was this pivot for the company during COVID.
Right.
And it was really this opportunity where it was like, okay, my role is either going to change at Purple Patch and evolve, or now is the time. And really with the family, that was the decision maker for me. And I was like, to be able to take a step back and intentionally raise our child and spend more time with Lauren and do those things. And also on the professional side, to be able to work more one-on-one and be less on the administrative side was really something that had interested me more and more as I'd grown professionally. And that was really conversation I was grateful for Matt with, because it ended up being really fluid when I left. Like he was, gave me his blessing. He was, helped us launch the company in the sense of like giving me, his full blessing and obviously what I'd learned at Purple Patch. But yeah, it ended up being really good for them and really good for us too. And so far we've been really successful and
the timing of it sounds great. I mean, you obviously are appreciating this, but I think, time with your child when they're this young, you're never going to get that back. Like
totally.
It's such a it's a blessing. Like I run my own business, and when my daughter was born, I basically took like 3 months off because I could. So I could just be home every day with her. And I love it. It was great. Did the same thing with my son. With COVID, it helped. My son he just turned a year, and he's basically been with his mom and dad at home every day, like for his entire memory. And it's a huge blessing. So I'm glad that you're seeing it as such, because it's such a great opportunity. But with that, so as you're trying to grow Black Sheep Endurance Project, and so how's that going? Like, what's do you have what's the model? Is it just private one-on-one coaching? Is it sort of group based? What are you guys thinking in terms of that?
Yeah, it's I don't even know that we're trying to grow it, to be honest, because one of the things we intentionally started out with was capping our athlete load. And so it's the only thing we do is one-to-one coaching. We have really personal and good relationships with all our athletes, and both of us work with a small number of clients. And that really allows us to deliver, really individual coaching, have really strong relationships, and be involved in the day-to-day on pretty much, obviously their training, but and so, yeah, it's
been really good. I started coaching a little over a year ago, more as like a hobby, just because I enjoyed it. I started while I was still racing. I had a few guys, and then it's really taken off. And I would say we haven't advertised. It's just been kind of word of mouth, and we've had more success than we anticipated. And so, we're trying to find that balance of taking new athletes, keeping, the ones we have, and what really is like that magic number for us. You know, how many athletes do we want? How big do we want to grow this, or do we want to keep it small? And I think we still want to keep it pretty small. So it's a pretty like niche kind of program for us, and it's really exciting.
I mean, it's so refreshing to kind of hear that it's like, oh, we're not just trying to maximize,
chase the dollar,
you know, let's get 1,000 athletes and just like, you know, kind of crush it. But
send them all the same email.
You know, I love the idea of just keeping the quality super high and the sort of individual and attention super high. I mean, that's
and we developed a whole business strategy around it, right? Because we obviously need to make a living. But 5% of our athletes are either developing pros or amateurs or people we find interesting that need coaching that we're able to give back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so we sort of have a sliding scale for some of our athletes who can't afford premium coaching, right? And then we also have your typical executives, that can obviously pay a little bit more. So that balance has allowed us, one, to keep our roster smaller by not having to coach more people to make a living, but also be able to work with people that, maybe aren't your typical high earners in triathlon that are XC or whatever, which, it ends up being this really fantastic balance of, I think, I won't speak for Lauren, but for me, I get just as much joy out of, someone that's able to train 10 hours a week, but has a really demanding job and their family's, front and center. And so that always comes before sport. And to see people like that succeed, not only in their lives, but also in triathlon or in endurance sports. And then you have on the other end, our pro athletes who are training 30 hours a week, and that is their livelihood. And to be able to see them grow and develop is obviously also amazing. So that sort of diversity for us is key to what we want to do too.
Yeah, and keeping our roster small gives us time to really dial in people's nutrition for races, kind of study mentally what's going on, are they approaching training and racing with the right mindset, and kind of dive into that. And I think that's overlooked a lot. And that's a lot of high performance. And then also trying to keep their body healthy, mobility exercises, the little extra things that are typically avoided. If as a coach, if you're coaching, 50 people, these are things you just don't have time really to stop and look at. And they're actually the most important things. So by keeping our roster small, I think it allows us to not only just give training every day, but also cover all the bases there. And I think that's why our athletes are pretty successful.
Nice.
Yeah. And I will say, we also, one of the foundational things we do with all our athletes is metabolic testing, and the technology in the last 3 years, especially, has just come so far what you can do remotely. And so we've partnered with Inside, which is a metabolic software that you can put people through series of intervals in their trainer and get, substrate utilization, VO2 max, VLA max. And that really allows us to, when we start with someone, or if we've worked with someone, really take a look under the hood at what's going on with an athlete and how their power is composed, how their speed's composed. And so even they're 3,000 miles away, but we have, this really critical look at, okay, what is this athlete's physiology? And that really holds a mirror up for us, because we're able to do baseline testing, but then come back to it in 3 months and say, okay, is what we are doing working? And that's our validation, right? That's our accountability as a company to our athletes of look, not everyone gets the same training, and everyone knows this. You can put 5 athletes through the same program, and 3 of them will get fast and 2 of them will get slower, right? And there's obviously reasons behind that. So for us to be able to use that technology and for our athletes remotely is just been amazing.
Yeah, love it. That's awesome. I love hearing that, and keeping it kind of small. And I do. It is refreshing. Kind of Chris said it a little bit. It's beyond just, here's what you need to swim, bike, and run, or swim and run, or whatever, triathlon or swim run or ultra running, whatever it is, beyond just the email of here's your plan or the text or whatever. It's how's the mind doing? How's the body feeling? All this other kind of stuff that actually, if you go to one of these larger coaching companies, it's like, oh, you want a nutrition consulting? That's $1,500.
And this is something. So we had Mario Feroli on the show, I don't know, a month ago or something like that, and he's a
good friend of mine. He's a great
he's an awesome dude. He's like our neighbor.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw his wife at the pool this morning. One of the things he says,
I coach his wife.
Oh yeah,
I was gonna.
I'm gonna have to give her some shit about that.
I saw her tag you guys on the Instagram.
So one of the things he always says is like, one of the things he does as a coach that more coaches should do is listen. Like listen to their athletes more, like ask questions of their athletes. And I've known Mario for years, and to me that just seems like it seems so obvious.
Seems like a no-brainer.
It seems like a no-brainer, but you don't hear coaches say that. So the fact that you guys are saying that, to me, that already means that you guys have like a sort of a sensibility to the whole person as an athlete, not just like, oh, here's another person in our training plan. Let's just roll out, Training Peaks, Series B or whatever. So
I like wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, I wonder how Marion's calf is doing.
Yeah.
I gotta ask her tomorrow. Like I'm dreaming about these people. Like they're my kids.
Healthy, but
it's like I'm always thinking about them, and I feel like our athletes they're not just athletes. Like
like your family kind
relationships are like, I want to check in day to day and kind of see things. I probably am actually annoying. They're probably like, oh, Lauren's messaging me again.
So Lauren, so actually want to drill in on that or drill down on that a little bit. So, we mentioned so this is like Carton and Mario's vibe, it's your vibe, but where do you think that comes from? Like, is it just from your personal experience that you're like, hey, we think this is the best way to do it from what we've seen? Or is it something else? Is it just like your personality? Because it seems rare. So I would just like to know, like, was there some experiences you guys had as coaches that kind of made you go in this direction, or what was it?
Well, for me, I think I raced, professionally 10 years. I had some great coaches. I had some not so great coaches. And look, I'm like, where did I go wrong? And it was not being held accountable to things. It was letting little injuries go too far. It was having a vegan diet and no one was telling me like, hey, you're not eating enough, it was me going too hard and training a lot and thinking I was like getting faster because I was smashing my workouts. And in fact, that was making me slower. Like I had no one in my corner really keeping an eye on me. And then, I would say I struggled a lot when I was racing with like anxiety and sleep, and more of that mental aspect. And I really wish I would have had someone guiding me there. And at the end of my career, I worked with Chris Lieto, and he was that for me. He was about 8 years too late into my career though. But that's what I was missing. And then as soon as I started working with him, I made some huge gains, and I would say I was training less and I was training easier. And I'm like, what has been the big difference here? And it was those small things that were most memorable to me, but also I think made the bigger gains over my career.
Nice.
Yeah. And I'll just add one thing to that is when we, sort of started and we're drawing out like mission statements and the things that were important to us. It was, one of them was like, we want to work as hard as our athletes are working. Right. And it's amazing how much commitment, athletes have to endurance sport, right? And it's such a huge part of their lives. And I've seen coaching, and I've had it before where it's sort of an afterthought, someone's a great athlete. And so, I'm going to coach. For us, we, one of the things I really enjoy is just having those conversations with athletes, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be about sport. Like we get so much from that too. And, that's really, really gratifying, I would say.
Awesome, man. That was, hearing the philosophy it seems like such a balanced, well-rounded, well thought out kind of plan. It's real. I'm not really surprised that you're having the success that you're having, even at a small kind of cap that it seems like you're kind of bursting at the seams in terms of athletes. But let's turn the ship a little bit into swimrun. It's what we are, after all. That's what we're stoked about, a swimrun. So we know Matt has done a swimrun. Lauren, have you tethered yourself to another person and you know.
I have. I did one.
Oh, boy.
I did the Odyssey
Casco Bay
last year.
Awesome.
August.
We've done that race as well, so we want to hear from each of you how you first heard about Swimrun. Obviously, being from Maine, you have a little bit of an advantage because that's sort of the one of the birthplaces of the U.S. movement, I would say.
Yeah. So I started. God, it must have been 5 years ago when I think Lars put on the first race with Jeff Cole. At that time, I think it was Swimrun. It wasn't Odyssey yet. It was
Swimrun USA.
Swimrun USA, yeah.
Yeah, and so it was this small, sort of interesting race that someone was putting on. Then we had heard, of Ötillö and things like that. And so it was 5 years, and I partnered with John Stevens every year we've done it. And I've just seen the race grow, right, and also seen this incredible excitement, that obviously was international at first, but now is really caught on fire for obvious reasons in the USA, because it's such a breath of fresh air from triathlon, right? And triathlon is amazing, but I would say most people come to Swimrun from triathlon, and it's such a more casual community sort of event, right? Where where a triathlon, everything is dialed and perfect, and exactly what's going to be in the aid stations, how much is in your bottle. And the swim run, you're just like, I'm going to go do this race with this other person, strapped to me, and so that sort of
freedom.
I don't want to call it casual, but freedom to just really go out and enjoy the experience and to be able to race in not only Maine, but I think John and I did one in the one in Orcas Island. We were able to, we raced against Lance Armstrong and Simon Whitfield.
And you beat them.
So that's good. We won't let you forget that.
I will say, they, they were not in top shape, but it was an incredible experience to be able to just, you're like, this is this event that's bringing all these people together, doing something outdoors and seeing these incredible places. In triathlon, your head's down, you're
right.
Hammering. It's just a different experience.
Totally. So then Lars somehow edged you out to take John and race Ötillö Catalina with him. Or you were happy. There was probably a baby around there somewhere, I would guess.
It was timing, because Lauren was due a few months later, and so ultimately we just decided it was going to be too much. And I think I had a camp with Purple Patch the next week, so doing that event was just didn't work out for me. But I have such a great relationship with both of them, and I think John went and did Ötillö one year. So we won Casco Bay every year we've done it, but John went and did Ötillö with another guy. And I've not gone over there, but it's something Lauren and I want to do someday, is get over there and maybe race together.
Oof, I see a little formidable mixed team.
Yeah.
Here.
So awesome
that's great. And Lauren, how did you come across Swimrun?
Well, actually, one of my best girlfriends is Sarah McClarty, and she did a bunch of the swim runs. Mm-hmm. She was also a professional triathlete, but she did Ötillö. She was really big into it years ago, when it first started, and that's when I heard about it. Mm-hmm. And then and then I met Matt and kind of followed him and saw he was doing them, and I would say biking is my least favorite of the three disciplines in triathlon, so it looked really appealing to me. I was like,
and traveling without a bike, oh my god,
Now traveling with a baby, I don't know which one is harder, bike or baby.
At least you don't have to pay extra to travel with a baby.
It's true.
But I really enjoyed my time Casco Bay last year. I entered last minute. My partner, I first time I'd ever talked to him was the night before the race. I had never met him before. His name is Ed Baker. He's a really good triathlete based out of Boston. And then, we do the whole 4-hour event or whatever. And I was like, oh, we're easily going to win. We're going to smash it. And we got our butts kicked. what is their name? The Bronson?
Yeah, the Boston Red Sox. Yeah, they're.
Oh God, I was like, we're
can't
gonna smash them. Was I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, the Boston Red Sox, they're super humble, but they're probably the best mixed team in the U.S., I'd say.
They're so dialed.
They're great.
They're so good together. But, I did this whole event with Ed, and I'm talking the whole time. We're chatting, and the end, of the last run, he pulls out his earplugs. He's like, no, I didn't hear you the whole time. I had earplugs.
Oh my God. That's like, that's so funny. That's like Chipper's nightmare because I have to swim with earplugs. So
we didn't communicate the whole time.
Wow.
And we were just in sync. I mean, we got second.
Wow.
But it was a great event. I would love to do more in the future. So I definitely will. Maybe we'll see if Matt and I do one together.
That'd be awesome.
It was a good sport. I called him up and he had not been swimming at all, and I was like, Ed, you want to do this swim run? He's like, sure. He's like one of the few people you could just drag off the couch and
right. He's good for it.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's too funny.
Awesome. So I imagine that the Black Sheep Endurance Project has majority probably triathletes and then kind of a mix of ultra runners. I don't know how many swim runners you have or any at all, but how would you approach building a plan or structuring a plan for somebody that is doing swim run as they identify as a swim runner and they're doing almost exclusively swim run events where there's such variance between the courses. So if our A races, if we're doing the Casco Bay race or, we're doing the Austin Swimrun Odyssey Swimrun Austin, Texas race, and that is a completely different race than the Casco Bay race. So love to hear kind of both everyone's thoughts on the approach to building the plan for a sport with such variance in it.
I guess whenever we work with anyone, and this is something I talk with John Stevens a lot about, is really just backing up and saying, okay, what are the demands of the race? So obviously if you're doing Ötillö, that's a 10-hour race, so huge considerations to fueling, and the training for an event like that is completely different to, event where I think Austin's 6,000 meters of swimming and
it's about a half marathon, 13 miles of running.
13 miles of running and 3.5 miles of swimming. So
and so if just relating it triathlon, it's the difference between an Olympic distance and an Ironman, and the training demands are totally different for those two events. So I would say if you're doing one of the longer swim runs, breaking that apart and saying, okay, is this a swim dominant race or is it a running, or is running the dominant, sort of discipline in this, whereas Casco Bay, I think you're swimming 5 miles. So, all things in, it's a very swimming heavy race.
Yep.
And so then saying, okay, what's the person's background? So, that's always the starting point for us. And I think a big thing when you talk about any endurance race is really you're never really going that fast, right? So most of the training for us, and this is for triathlon and swim run, would be let's just call it is aerobic work, right? So working with some sort of heart rate cap that you've identified, that making sure you're racing within, training within a range that's, acceptable. You're burning, you're not just burning tons of carbohydrates when you're racing. And it can be really tempting for endurance athletes in general to go out and smash those hard intervals. I think that one of the unique things I would put into a swim run program, and maybe not Austin, is I would do a lot of Stairmaster work for that strength element. Or if you're lucky enough to live in a place like, Nevada or Marin, I would just do a lot of those hills. To, and not all in, but just making sure you're spending a lot of the time on feet and well within sort of your conversational pace, because that's usually what a swim run in race is. It's a long sort of slow burn event where, you have to maintain a steady pace throughout. And so yeah, that starts with training appropriately for those events, and not getting too caught up in the intensity, right? I think if you look at endurance sports in general and the advent of Zwift and everything in the last 10 years, it's all skewed towards time starved and intensity. You can get, and you can go faster if you do more intervals. And of course there is a benefit to intervals. And I'm not saying, doing high intensity isn't important, but let's just not forget these events are aerobic, and they're mainly aerobic endeavors. So need to be able to go out and exercise for, 3, 4, 5 hours and beyond, and be able to fuel for that duration and be able to maintain pace and form and things like that. And so, it's hard to nail down a specific thing and say, okay, because I think it really is athlete dependent. Like if Lauren's a very gifted swimmer, so like the swim would be less of an emphasis for her, and I might focus on the brain of the race for someone like that. But if someone's got their swim run and swimming is a weakness for them, and you have, let's say, 6 months to train, I would probably do a big swim block where I'm saying, okay, for 3 months, we're really going to try and swim 5 times a week, and most of that would be in the pool, I think, just for efficiency's sake, but getting in 15 to 20K if possible, and really getting the hours in the pool, and obviously make sure you're supporting that with running, and getting out for those long aerobic runs, with as much varied terrain as possible.
Yeah. So Matt, I have a question about that. So one thing that we've sort of seen anecdotally and heard other people say, it's like, swim run, if you're a really strong swimmer, it really makes the sport easier if you can just, do a 10K swim run or 5 miles of swimming. If that's no problem for you, then you're more likely to have a pleasant experience at your race or whatever. Is that something that you'd co-sign on, like being for something like swim run? I guess for like triathlon, being super strong on the bike is really helpful to help you on the run afterwards. In swim run, would you say like really working on your swim, being able to go long, being able to maintain form and all that stuff would be something to really work on if that's a deficiency for you?
Absolutely. Because if you're talking about, swimming 5 miles, you're not just talking about swimming 5 miles on a pool. You're talking about full gear, buoy, tether in varying conditions with paddles. And I'll say this as a lifelong swimmer, and I've swam Ironmans in under 50 minutes.
That's quick for anyone.
I do not swim with paddles because the breakdown for me mechanically, I'm just not strong enough to maintain swim form and power in the water with paddles throughout a race like that. And so depending on what level I would say that might be a mistake for some people, is going into a long event like that with paddles. However, you look at, it's also a huge disadvantage for me going up against, if I were to go to Ötillö, I'm at such a disadvantage because I'm not a great paddle swimmer. So if Lauren and I were going to go do Ötillö, I would do a huge block of work of really doing, getting stronger in the water and sort of changing my stroke for that and being a more power-based swimmer. But obviously, if you come from a swimming background, you can emphasize that a little bit less. And in the sense of, if you're coming from a developing background, you really need to make sure you can swim and maintain form for, multiple miles of swimming with gear on, which is, a real challenge. And there's obviously huge cross-discipline fitness from doing work in the pool. You still need to run, but that's not lost in the run either. So the fresher you're able to be, coming out of those swims is going to benefit anyone. Again, it's really athlete dependent, but I would really if someone's saying, I really want to work on this, I'm doing swim run and I'm training and I really want to develop my swim, I think that's a multi-month, and even year project of really building up swim volume, far beyond what triathlon is, because you can swim 2 or 3 times a week and sort of get yourself through the race because it's such a small part of the event. But in swim run, obviously it's front and center. And so that really needs to be a focal point for anyone that's not a super strong swimmer.
Totally.
Yeah. And when I did my race, I'm a really good paddle swimmer and I really struggled at the end. I would say if I went back and had to retrain for that event, I would have done a lot of paddle and band only work. So lose the buoy and really build that upper body strength. Some more upper body stuff in the gym. And then maybe I would do a few long swims, like 6Ks in the pool. In the last 2K I'm doing with paddles hard with really fatigued arms.
Gotcha.
You got to do a lot of strength work. I would say it's not even like speed so much. Like I would ditch the threshold intervals and I would focus more on long strength stuff. So, I've already been researching kind of like swimming with a t-shirt on, right? And paddles. Like whatever, or a drag suit, like something that's really going to fatigue you to try to get you in to that place you're going to be in the swim run. Because the problem is you can do a 5K swim and you're like, I feel great. And you can do a couple of those a week and you're like, I'm in swim shape. But like, you need to try to simulate how you're going to feel after, 4 miles of swimming and X miles of running, And so the only way really to do that is to kind of create a lot of drag and long sets, and try not to break down your form too much when you're really fatigued. That's
a really, really great point. And I want to keep you on the line here. So, I mean, the more swim runs we do and the more practicing and swim run practice that you do, to me, swim run is the sport that I would almost relate it similar to kind of ultra running. It has a lot of problem solving that you have to do on top of the swim and the run, like the physical stuff. There's also a lot of problem solving that you're doing. And Lauren, you touched a little bit on kind of mental toughness or anything like that. So I'm wondering what is the kind of approach that you would take, especially as an ex-pro triathlete, for when it is a problem that you're facing. It's whether, maybe your shoulders are more blasted, or you have some nutrition problems, or you're getting a little cold from in and out of the water all the time. There's more problems, I feel, in swim run than there is kind of other sports. And what's your...
And like the longer the race, the more problems.
Yeah, the more problems you have. So what's kind of your approach to... You come up to a problem, how are you handling that kind of mentally, or what's your process for that?
I think these swim runs, though, you have all these little segments, and you really got to break it down into, okay, I'm doing a 1,500 meter swim right now. Like instead of looking at it as like, I have this 8-hour event ahead of me, I'm never going to make it, like we have so much longer to go. How many more segments do we have? And really just focus on that one thing you're in and get through that. And then, go to the next one. And I think in training, to train for these events, I would actually do long sessions. So like long, like I was saying, longer pool swim, and then put your main set at the end of that workout. So you're already mentally fatigued, you're like probably frustrated with the swim because you've been in the water already 1 hour. You don't want to be there. And like, that's when you have to show up and like do your main set. So swim 4K and then let's do our 10-200s hard, So because I think in these swim runs, it's not only physical fatigue, but it's mental fatigue, because you're trying to guide your way through, and you're sighting and you're figuring out the run course, and am I on course or am I off course, or when am I going to eat, So I think it's mentally draining. So I think putting yourself in those situations, setting up little challenges at the end of your 2-hour long trail run. Okay, let's do some tempo work, or like something like that is going to train your mind to kind of switch, because I think that's what's important, is learning how to kind of shut down that poor me, I'm having a bad day, this sucks kind of mindset, to like, okay, I'm going to focus on what I have to do right now, and I'm going to get through it, and I'm going to move to the next kind of, segment. So doing things like that in training, making little mental cues to yourself. If you're tired in the swim, okay, I'm just going to focus on engaging my core. That's all I'm going to think about right now. I'm not going to think about anything else. And like, it kind of gets you out of that, and then you reset and you're back into what you're doing. So you have to like kind of practice those mental games in training.
Nice.
So you're ready on race day.
I like that. So then the core, whatever sort of we'll just say a trick, whatever mental gymnastics you're going to perform on yourself, you're also doing that at the end when you have your big practice workout. It's like, okay, I got my 10 200s at tempo pace after I already have 4,000 yards in the bank. And that's when you kind of practice working on those. Is it, okay, stay taut, or, okay, remember that really good session, like try to pull back those sessions with the band and the paddles only when I was fatigued. I got through that. I can get through this 800 swim or whatever.
Exactly. Or like, and you get to those 10 200s at the end of your long workout and you just take it one by one. You know, okay, I have 8 laps in the pool right now. I'm going to get through it. And then I'm going to do that again. I'm going to do it again, and break it down into really small segments. Even in the swim run, you know, I'm just going to get through this next swim segment, and then I'm going to make, you know, and then if I don't want to do it anymore, I'll quit, you know, or I'll go slow. But like, it's sometimes just getting through those 5 or 10 minutes of a dark space, and you're actually going to be fine, you know? So I think it's learning how to fight through those downtimes. Because usually after 5 minutes or so, it's like you're back on track, you're feeling good. And it's usually nutrition based. You're usually bonking, you know, or you're uncomfortable. And yeah, I think trying to set challenges and times when you know you're going to be uncomfortable in training is how you kind of train for that. And that all comes back to kind of having a coach, because rarely are you going to set challenges for yourself when you know you're going to be uncomfortable. You know, like if you don't have a coach, you're probably not going to do those 10 200s at the end of that swim set.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's so funny you say that, because last night when Chipper and I were prepping for this interview, we were talking about, oh, wouldn't it just be nice to just have a coach just tell us what to do and we could just do it? And, you know, whatever they say, we'll just do it. Like, we're definitely committed to the sport. It's like, oh, it'd be just so great if we could just someone tell us what to do. It doesn't matter how hard it is. We'll just do it without having to kind of come up with it on our own. And we have some access to workouts that we do and stuff. But yeah, I think that piece of it can't be overstated. And I think also because you have a partner, it adds a little bit of pressure, but also some accountability too, because you want to be strong for your partner. You want to make sure that you're helping your partner if they're having a low point, and they're helping you if you're having a low point, because you have to finish these events together. And I found that's actually been like a strength. Like if I'm having a low point, like I know I need to keep pushing for Chipper, because I don't want to be the weakest link. He doesn't want to be the weakest link, and we're always looking out for each other in a race. Obviously, the longer the race, the more you're like, are you eating? Have you taken a gel? Like, what's going on? But I feel like that piece can help and hurt. From the pressure perspective, is that something that you would sort of co-sign on?
Well, I think you need to also know how to communicate with your partner, right? Yeah. Even it's just like in a marriage, like you see someone having a low point or a low day, you know, the other person needs to say, hey, I'm bonking right now. I need you to get me through this segment. Yep. You know, let's get some fuel. I need to reset. I'm not doing good mentally. And I think having that communication with your partner in these long races is important. So, you know, if you're bonking and dragging along and you're not saying anything, like it's going to be hard for your partner to lift you up. And so I think having cues or code words or however you want to do it is important, to really be aligned and, you know, get the best out of each other, because I think you should be able to use each other to get the best result. You know, instead of kind of just going through this course side by side, you know, you're drawing energy off your partner when you're at a low and he's at a high, or whatnot. And I think that's, you know, I think you need to be doing a lot of sessions with your partner if possible.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. The partner sessions, the swimrun practices are really important. Now, before we move on, there's one question that I know our listeners will probably want some insight on. So you mentioned doing some strength work in the gym, especially upper body. Do you have like just a couple workouts that you think would be important, especially to get sort of the shoulder strength for paddles, that you'd recommend?
Yeah. So we talk about gym. We talk about gym work and recommend it to our athletes, and we're very poor execution. We're very poor at executing ourselves. But I think if you can do pull-ups or some sort of assisted pull-ups, that's huge. Any sort of lat movement, and some people have Vasa trainers, but I actually think a great tool that anyone can use at home is bands, and starting with some lower resistance, and really just working, that swim motion and engaging your lats and triceps and just keep building some fatigue. And that's something you can do prior to a swim session or in the evening after you've done a swim session. It's a really good, 15-minute workout which you can just get an arm burner.
Yeah,
that's
actually especially if you're like time limited. Like for us, our pool sessions are limited to 45 minutes to an hour just because of COVID and lane reservation. So you could almost build in some fatigue by doing some band work before going in.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll stay away from sort of compound movements because they absolutely do have a place. And if you've had Mikey O on, he can speak to this. Like there's just no replacement for really good dynamic gym movements. Right. But any supplemental strength you can do with bands, which is low risk, pull-ups, push-ups, anything that's body weight, you're really dealing with a low risk environment. So anyone at home can sort of build that into their program without worrying about injuring themselves.
Nice.
But even, I will say, getting specific in the pool is a really great tool as well. So, Lauren touched on the t-shirt and doing band only work. And I'll add a caveat to that is like, I think for most swimmers, you're going to want to use a buoy because most people can't maintain body position just with a band.
Or do like 25s.
Yeah, or breaking up. So doing, 20, 25s with 10 seconds rest where your whole aim is to, just keep those hips up while you're swimming. I mean, that's an incredible.
That hurts. Having done that,
exactly.
It hurts.
Yeah. And so getting to a place where you're comfortable doing some band only work or, you're starting with a big buoy and then you're working, maybe using the any buoy where you get to a place where it's more of a strength workout. So really challenging yourself in the pool with, starting with small paddles and working up to some bigger paddles or having some different paddles in the bag, things like that. Is also a really great supplement. And I would call strength-based swimming, which is just irreplaceable if you're talking about swim run.
Nice. And that definitely echoes. We had Jerry Rodriguez and Emma Kate Lidbury on some episodes ago. Honestly, it could have been 3 months. It could have been last week. I don't know at this point. But yeah, it was like
kind of like parenting.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, especially in the endurance, or if you're just getting into it, are like, yeah, what's that silver bullet workout? Or what's the one thing that I can do that will automatically, shave 10 seconds off my 100? It's like, there isn't. It's just doing consistency work. There's no real shortcuts. You got to put the work in. And it sounds like you're echoing those same thoughts, which is great.
Yeah, and I think if you just even return to, obviously Jerry's pioneer, and he's been a great mentor to me as well. But the consistency thing, just applied to endurance sports in general, is just so true. Like people overestimate what they can do in a year, but really underestimate what can happen in 3. Yeah. And, I just break it down to really, if you want to improve swimming, whether you're, a developing swimmer or you're, a top age group swimmer, you're really talking about being in the pool 5 times a week, or swimming 5 times a week like that, and doing that for 3 months of just consistent work. And obviously if you have a coach or have someone who can watch you and you can do some stroke analysis, like that's beneficial. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, like people, I can't tell you how many triathletes like, I want to get faster at my swim. And I'm like, well, I'm just swim. They're like, yeah, twice a week, all the time, and I'm like, well, that's the baseline. Right. But to be able to get to a place where you can swim, where you're swimming 20K a week for several months, you will be amazed at the progress that can happen in doing that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Matt and Lauren, you've provided such a great, insight into your coaching philosophy and how you're training your athletes, as well as some specific swim run stuff. We really appreciate the look into that. I'm sure people are going to want to know. Yeah, are you accepting new athletes?
Yeah, if you don't I
want to be coached by Black Sheep.
If you don't have a wait list, you should probably think about getting one together.
We are accepting new athletes. Okay. We've got a few spots left. We're both capped at 20, so we coach 20 or less athletes, and we're getting up there.
And it really, truly, I mean, I will say anybody who just inquires doesn't mean we're going to work with them. Like, I think it's important. It's a good fit.
It's a good match. Yeah.
So it's case by case scenario, you know?
And and also part of what we do and really believe in is collaborating with other coaches. So, you know, whether it's Mario, which, you know, I bounce ideas off him all the time. You know, we've had phone calls with Dan Lorang, who's like been kind enough to just hop on a phone call with us, which is just amazing. Right. So we know coaches, you know, throughout the country that, you know, we think can provide great coaching, whether it's in Maine or California. And so sometimes that's our route too, is saying, hey, look, like, you know, I think this would be a good coach for you to work with, right? There's a young woman who reached out to me that wants to do her first triathlon, and I connected her with someone in Maine because she's a really developing person in the sport. And I just know that commitment to teach someone from the ground up in triathlon is you want a coach that you can have access to, that can see her in the pool, that can, you know, maybe go on a run with her. And so those things are always sort of taken into account. So we're always glad to have a conversation with anyone, and especially obviously other coaches, you know, in the spirit of collaboration.
Yeah.
Love it.
Great.
Love it.
Awesome. And then do you have like an email or something they can reach out to you, or your Instagram account? We'll link to that, or what's the best way to find out more?
We actually don't have a website, and we've sort of been intentional about that. We'll do one eventually, but we've really just done an Instagram to feature the athletes.
If you reach out via our Instagram, we'll get back to you. Cool. And our email is on the Instagram as well.
We'll make sure to list that. And
it's super not professional right now, but we'll get a website one day. If anybody's
you're the black sheep. You're just living up to your name, like, you know, screw digital marketing. We don't even need it. We're the Black Sheep Endurance Project. So
yeah, exactly.
Well, we're just kind of struggling with what do we need really, and like what do we not need.
Well, there's so many. You know, you look at what Plus does out there, right, and just the
marketing,
the newsletters, and you go, and we just go, we really don't have the time or the desire.
Yeah, totally.
You know, and
we're like, we should do a newsletter. I'm like, but should we? Like, I don't know.
Hey, I mean, you're avoiding some major mistakes that a lot of people do, where they try to just do everything and they do it all pretty shitty. You're like, we'll just do the coaching really well.
You know? Yeah, that's all we care about. We want to do our coaching like 100%, and I really want to stay away from the noise, kind of. So, you know,
awesome. and Chipper and I can talk to you about this offline, since this is what we do professionally. So, so thank you guys so much for being on the show. We really appreciate it. I mean, I got a lot out of it. I'm sure listeners will too. So, yeah, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Of course, guys, our pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Low Tide Boyz, a Swimrun podcast. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, and leave a review on iTunes if you're so inclined.
You can also sign up for a newsletter at lowtideboyz.com. That's boys with a Z. And check out our meme page at The Low Tide Boyz on Instagram. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, drop us an email at lowtideboyz@gmail.com.
We'd like to thank Writing Easy Records for our show music, and of course our wives for their support and tolerance of our swimrun activities, hobbies, and other bullshit we do.
Finally, you can support our efforts on Patreon. Until next time, get out there and go for a swim.
And then a run.
And then another swim.
Then another run.
And then another swim.
And then run to the finish line. And just keep going until you're done.
Yes. Or
until
run
you cross the finish line.
Or run to the car.
Or run to your car.
Somewhere. Just keep running. Peace.